Hi, I wanted to make this video because I've been thinking. And this time I've been thinking about my neurodiversity experience. And the reason I've been thinking about my neurodiversity experience is because I've recently come to the realization that I'm neurodiverse and I want to be able to better explain it to other people, exactly what it means. And I've discovered that it can be a difficult subject to talk about because it's a very broad subject and people's awareness and understanding can be so different, so you can't really make any assumptions about what they already know, and that can make it quite hard work. So I wanted to make a video to talk a bit about neurodiversity in general, and also about how I plan to explain my own experience to other people. It's helping me to check on my own understanding and also to really think about some helpful ways to explain it to other people, regardless of what their current level of knowledge on the subject is. So maybe if you're in a similar situation, you might find it useful. So I was planning for this to be called my autism experience, but now that I've discovered giftedness as another type of neurodiversity, and I think one that seems a closer match to my personal experience, so I'm not sure that calling it my autism experience feels right anymore. So I'm going with my neurodiversity experience for now because I'm still having trouble with the term gifted. I mean, hopefully it doesn't really matter, and whatever type of neurodiversity someone has, having a personal statement about it should help to build confidence and clarity when it comes to explaining the traits to other people and letting them know what impact those traits have on your life and what kind of support you think will be helpful. So maybe the first question I might be asked if I tell someone that I'm neurodiverse is, what does that mean? And I think the easiest and perhaps the most basic answer is that neurodiversity represents natural variations in the human brain. It doesn't mean defect, but it does mean differences in how people's brains work and therefore how they think, how they learn, and how they experience and interact with the world around them. So even though it's quite a simplistic answer, I can honestly say that it's taken me quite a long time to digest what that actually means. And I don't think other people find it very easy to grasp either. I mean, maybe we all have a tendency to think that other people experience things the same way that we do. So it's quite hard to understand and believe that they don't. You can't see what's going on inside someone else's brain, so you can't know that they might be having a very different experience from you in the same situation. I mean, someone might believe that something can't have hurt you because they were there too and experienced the same thing, so they think they know how you experienced it too. I know that I've been guilty of that in the past when I didn't know any different, and I think it might be one of the biggest barriers to overcome when trying to explain what neurodiversity means. People's experiences really can be totally different, so it isn't possible to know how someone else will react just by thinking about how something affects you. But even understanding that doesn't really help to clear up what neurodiversity means, because everyone is an individual and will have their own personality and their own differences in how they think and learn and interact with the world, just by being alive. So, what's the difference between just being alive and being neurodiverse? I think it can honestly be a bit of a blurry line, which also doesn't help when it comes to trying to understand the difference between neurotypical and neurodiverse. But as a very general guide, the split is currently thought to be around 80% to 20%, with 80% being neurotypical and 20% being neurodiverse. And in some ways, that's the thing that determines the difference. The way that the brains of the 80% work is considered to be neurotypical, with the other 20% being considered neurodiverse. But in the same way that those 20% considered neurodiverse will have a lot of variations, so will the 80% who are considered neurotypical, with some of them being closer to being neurodiverse than others. Are you confused yet? I think it's probably good if you are, because it's not a black and white subject, and if we think it is, then we're not understanding it correctly. But let's stick with the 80-20 split for now. And it isn't that one way is right and the other way is wrong, but when you consider that the environment that our society has created and the way that we measure success has been designed to fit with the majority rather than the minority. And that's where we start to encounter some problems. Maybe if each of us lived completely alone and didn't need to fit in with anyone else's idea of normal, maybe nobody would need any of these labels. But of course we can't live alone, well, not easily anyway. So we do find ourselves living alongside other people whose brains work differently from our own. And the bigger the difference is, the bigger the problems that can create. And when those problems start to cause distress and impact a person's ability to live their life, that's when it becomes something with a medical name. So we have roughly 20% of people whose brains work in a way that doesn't fit well with some of the ways that society has evolved. And then within that 20%, there's a smaller percentage of people whose brains work so differently that they really can't function in a neurotypical world. So I'm not one of those people, and I definitely don't want to undermine their experience or dilute their message. I think there's a lot of work to be done to make things more inclusive for everyone, and I hope that I'm helping with that in some small way by talking more about the subject. So I know that I'm in the less extreme part of that 20%, but I think everyone's experience is valid and deserves to be heard, including everyone in the 80% too. Being neurotypical doesn't mean that you don't experience any of the problems that neurodiverse people do. And anyone with support needs deserves to be heard. But those support needs tend to be higher for neurodiverse people living in a mostly neurotypical world. And it can be hard to know what someone's support needs are, and they may not even know that themselves. I know that that was the case for me, and I'm still trying to work that out. Maybe one day there'll be a more accurate way to assess everyone and maybe even tell them what their support needs might be before they even know themselves how they might react to the world around them. But until then, the way we currently find out is to put everyone in the same environments and wait and see how they react. I mean, it isn't a great way to do it, and it involves quite a lot of suffering. And also a lot of people not realising that their experience might be quite different from those around them. If we just take a loud noise as an example, it's easy to think that everyone experiences that noise the same. After all, the noise itself isn't different. But the brain of a neurodiverse person can experience that noise quite differently from the brain of a neurotypical person. The person having the more extreme reaction would likely be told not to exaggerate and to try and behave like everyone else. But that's very difficult, or even impossible, depending on what the internal experience is for that person. We can't tell how someone is experiencing something internally. The only clues are how they react or what they tell us. in a neurotypical world, it's generally expected that everyone should react the same. So neurodivergent people who are able tend to suffer in silence, and those that aren't able can end up being punished or ostracised for being different. If that happens, the neurodiverse person is likely to feel confused about why they seem to be different from other people, and then they can become afraid to show any of their reactions to things in case they're also seen as different. I'm still learning about the level of my own sensitivities because I've become so used to trying not to notice them or trying to quietly tolerate my discomfort. I know they're not as severe as some people because I don't experience meltdowns or burnout, but they are real for me, and now that I understand this a bit more, I want to allow myself the chance to investigate it. I know that certain smells can make me feel really unwell, particularly fragrances like air freshener, perfume or cleaning products. And sometimes a strong fragrance can give me an instant headache and make me feel angry. And I've often kept that to myself because I've found that other people often like those smells and might even comment how nice it smells when I'm thinking the exact opposite. And I've also noticed how noisy environments and multiple conversations going on around can make me feel stressed. I sometimes cover my ears if I can get away with it, or I use noise cancelling headphones, and they can be a great help. I've recently bought some loop earplugs which claim to reduce the background noise while still letting you hear conversations and not feel completely cut off from the world around you. I'm finding them quite good so far, but I haven't tested them out in many different situations yet. And I also find eye contact quite draining, and I think it's because of all the sensory information that comes along with looking at someone's eyes. I think for me it's similar to the experience with sounds and smells, that the message coming into my brain is stronger or louder, if that's an easier way to look at it. So it can become too much for me more quickly than it might for someone else. I can manage eye contact and I like being able to connect with other people, but I can't manage too much of it. And I can sometimes find it hard to take in what's being said if the eye contact is too much. And someone with more extreme, traits than me might not be able to manage it at all because the reaction within their brain is more than they can face. And as a society, we seem to have quite a fixed idea about eye contact, that it's necessary for authentic interaction, and just that alone can make life quite difficult for people who struggle with it. And as I understand it, neurotypical brains don't tend to have a problem with eye contact, but I don't know whether or not that's actually true. And for me, I often try and have another activity that can be a distraction and allow me to look away without seeming rude. I like walking side by side with someone while we're talking, and I've noticed that if the other person is wearing sunglasses, that makes it easier for me too. So those are my main sensory challenges, but I also seem to have differences in how I process information and how I focus on things that interest me. I have a need for a lot of information, so I can be prone to asking a lot of questions, and I can feel quite stressed if some information is missing or if I can't make sense of something. I would never have thought of that as a neurodivergent trait because it just makes good sense to me. I mean, it still makes good sense to me, but I have a better understanding now of why my emotions around this subject might be a bit more intense than someone else. And the last big one for me is hyperfocus. When something interests me, I'm happy to spend hours and hours researching and learning about it. It's part of the reason that I started this channel, because I felt I needed an outlet for all the thinking and learning that I like doing, that other people didn't necessarily want to hear about. When I make a video, I often consolidate a lot of information and thinking into just 10 or 15 minutes, and I find that really satisfying, and often a way to nicely draw a line under a subject that's been going round in my mind. It's been a good decision for me and helps me to manage that trait that I've always had and share in some of the outcomes with other people. So another area that's often a challenge for neurodiverse people is communication. But my scores in this area indicate that I'm quite neurotypical in my communication, so I can't really comment about that one very much. And perhaps it's part of the reason that I went so long without realising about my other traits. So I've got challenges around sensory processing and differences around information processing and information needs. And those things can make me feel uncomfortable in some social situations. I've been managing these challenges for a long time, so I don't need much support from other people, and that's partly because I have a good level of control over my environment. So that's my neurodiversity experience as it stands today. Maybe it will change again because I'm still learning and I may still uncover other things that I might have been burying. I'm still learning about what giftedness means and how much it can look like autism and also overlap with autism. I'm trying to be curious rather than annoyed about how unclear and confusing it can all feel. So my approach going forwards is going to be to stay curious and to pay attention to how I react to things or when I'm hiding things from other people, so that I can hopefully get a clearer picture of who I really am and what my brain might be trying to tell me. I'm giving it permission to stop hiding, and I'm interested to find out what I might uncover. Maybe you have your own story about neurodiversity and have found different ways to explain your experience to other people. I would love to know if you'd like to leave a comment. So I hope you've taken something useful from this video, but I think that's all for this time. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.